I'm Rowan Carter, 26. And 2 weeks ago, my mother walked into the convenience store where I've worked for 3 years and greeted me with, "Oh, you're still behind this counter. Our family deserves better than this." Loud enough that the man holding a cup of burnt coffee nearly dropped it. Paige drifted in behind her with her phone raised and whispered, "This lighting is perfect." Like my morning shift existed solely to fill her feed. My mother rested one hand on a shelf of protein bars and added, "Imagine wasting your 20s ringing up gum and gas cards." Scanning the room to be sure every stranger absorbed her performance. I kept my scanner moving because it was the only thing between me and the heat crawling up my throat. The woman in the fleece stepped aside when Paige edged closer, murmuring, "Smile. Rowan. My followers love authenticity." Though nothing about her smirk felt remotely authentic. My mother tilted her head, letting her perfume settle over the counter as she murmured, "Didn't I warn you that settling becomes a habit?" The same line she'd used every time she wanted to carve out another piece of my resolve. I tried to redirect her by asking what brought her here. But she brushed the question away with, "Relax. No one expects ambition from you anymore," leaving the words to float above the chip rack like dust. A man waiting for gas tokens shifted uncomfortably but didn't look away. Amelia came from the back with a stack of inventory papers, her eyes narrowing the moment she sensed tension. And she asked if everything was okay while my mother answered first with, "We're simply acknowledging her career plateau," tapping her nails against a charity donation box as if setting a tempo. Paige muttered, 3 years here and not even a promotion," angling her phone to capture my face and the fluorescent hum around us. I told them filming wasn't allowed near customers. And my mother's laugh thinned into the air as she murmured, "You're the only one worth filming." I scanned the next item, aware every person in line was waiting to see whether I would break or finally speak. The customers pretended to browse while Amelia stepped closer, her voice low but steady as she asked, "Rowan, are you sure you're okay?" And I told her I just needed a second because something bigger than this mess had happened earlier that morning. She frowned until I pulled my phone from my apron and whispered, "I got the offer from Ashford Financial Group," watching her expression shift from concern to shock as the espresso machine hissed behind us. She leaned in and murmured, "You're telling me this is your last shift," her tone softening as the man with the coffee cup stopped pretending he wasn't listening. I nodded once, gripping the register for balance, while the room seemed to tilt around the weight of what none of them knew yet. My mother raised an eyebrow when she caught the motion and asked, "What are you whispering about now, trying to keep me pinned beneath the version of me she'd always presented to the world?" I answered carefully with, "Something that doesn't involve you." But Paige slipped nearer, filming the receipt tape curling from the printer as she murmured, "Must be another excuse." Amelia stepped between us with a calmness I didn't feel and told them, "Rowan's working. You need to let her," drawing a few curious glances from the line forming by the door. My mother countered with, "We're family. We can speak to her whenever we choose," her bracelets chiming as if underscoring her certainty that I had nowhere higher to go. I held my phone at my side, its screen still bright with the subject line that had changed everything, and said, "You don't actually know what I do or where I'm going next," the words arriving before I could stop them. Paige gave a quick laugh and murmured, "Sure. Enlighten us," angling her camera to capture my face and the fluorescent glare above. I looked at both of them while the register beeped for the next item and answered, "I started Ashford on Monday," letting each syllable land in the narrow space between us. The store fell into an unexpected silence that made the sentence feel louder than anything they'd thrown at me all morning. 2 weeks earlier, my phone buzzed during a late shift, and when I answered, my mother opened with, "You do remember Mother's Day?" Right, while I wiped down the counter and told her I was scheduled to work that morning. She clicked her tongue and said, "A real daughter would make time for her mother." letting the accusation stretch until I replied that bills didn't pay themselves, which only pushed her to breathe out. "You sound just like your father right before he walked out." Paige's voice drifted from somewhere beside her with, "Mom." She's always dramatic about money. And I realized they were already teamed up in whatever plan they were stitching together. I ended the call when my mother sighed. "You'll regret choosing a paycheck over your family." Because I knew nothing I said would change the script she preferred. Not even an hour later. Paige texted, "Mom's hurt. You should apologize." Followed by, "Dotto. People say your store has great morning traffic. Maybe we'll swing by Sunday." Making it clear she wanted an audience. I typed nothing back as her dots appeared and vanished before she added, "Wear something cute. You never know who's watching." A comment shaped to sound helpful while meant to cut, when I ignored that too. She sent a photo of her fresh blowout with, "Ready for Mother's Day," as if the holiday existed solely for her aesthetic. The quiet of my apartment felt heavier knowing they had already chosen a stage. The next morning, Amelia noticed my tense shoulders and asked what was going on. And I told her, "My mom and sister are planning to show up Sunday." Unable to hide how certain I was, she asked why they'd come here. And I answered, "Because they know I can't leave my shift," which made her mutter, "Then I'll be ready." Hearing that steadiness from her was the only thing that made the countdown to Sunday feel survivable. Mother's Day arrived with the usual rush of commuters grabbing gas and coffee. And I had just finished helping a man choose windshield fluid when my mother swept through the door and announced, "I came to see where all your potential ended up." Loud enough that the two tourists by the cooler exchanged glances. Paige slipped in behind her and murmured, "Hold still. Rowan. This angle is great." Lifting her phone as if the store belonged to her. My mother gestured toward the counter displays and remarked, "Imagine spending your youth arranging beef jerky." Letting the words sink into the room like they were part of the decor, I asked if she needed anything. And she replied, "Aside from proof that you're still stuck, not really." A man waiting to buy a prepaid card froze when my mother tapped the counter and called to the nearby customers. "You're witnessing the cost of low standards." Turning the moment into something she expected them to applaud. Paige tilted her phone toward me and said, "Mom." She looks like she might cry. "Keep going." Her voice threaded with excitement she didn't bother to hide. I steadied my breath and told them both they couldn't film inside the store. But my mother waved that off with, "Please. You're hardly managing national security." Amelia stepped from the back room with a gentle but firm, "Ladies, you need to respect the space." And the customer line shifted as people leaned in. My mother turned to Amelia with a smile that didn't touch her eyes and replied, "Respect is earned. And I'm not sure Rowan has earned much of anything." Brushing invisible lint from her sleeve, Amelia countered, "She works hard here." But Paige cut in with, "Hard work doesn't mean you're going anywhere." Zooming her camera toward my name badge like it was evidence she'd been waiting to capture. I told them to leave if they weren't buying anything. And my mother laughed softly with, "You don't get to dismiss us, we're family." Turning the word into something meant to trap rather than reassure. The tourists whispered to each other again as the register beeped, highlighting the silence none of us filled. I tried ringing up the next customer. But Paige stepped closer and said, "Show us that famous attitude you gave on the phone," nudging her mother as if she'd cued the next scene. My mother leaned across the counter and murmured, "You embarrassed this family for years. Let us return the favor." Her bracelets chiming as though keeping time with her intention. Amelia positioned herself beside me and replied, "You need to stop." But my mother lifted her chin and answered, "The only thing that needs stopping is her pretending she's doing something with her life." I felt the eyes of everyone present settle on us while the store's hum narrowed into a single, sharp line of waiting. My mother's last jab hung in the air long enough that I set the bag of chips on the counter and told her, You don't get to talk about my life like it's yours to narrate. Surprising even myself with how steady my voice sounded. Paige angled her phone toward me again and muttered, "There she goes. Pretending she's above all this. Trying to stitch a story she thought she controlled." I shook my head and said, "I'm not pretending anything. Today is my last shift." Watching their expressions tighten in unison. A man waiting to pay stepped back as if he sensed something shifting beneath the surface. My mother gave a short laugh and replied, "Quitting before you fail again," letting the mockery wrap around her like it justified everything she'd done since she walked in. I met her eyes and told her, "I'm leaving because I have somewhere better to be," while the register beeped behind me, marking the moment more sharply than I expected. Paige scoffed and whispered, "Sure you do." But I lifted my chin and said, "I start at Ashford Financial Group tomorrow," letting the words land between us like a door finally unlocking. Even Amelia paused, her surprise flickering across her face before settling into something proud. My mother gave a small shake of her head and replied, "You expect us to believe a place like that wants you?" Her voice softer, but edged with disbelief she couldn't hide. I answered, "They already chose me," while Paige lowered her phone just enough for her confidence to waver. My mother stepped closer and murmured, "You're not built for anything beyond this counter." But the room had already shifted, and everyone knew it. I picked up the next item to scan and told her, "You can't define me anymore." Feeling the truth of it settled deeper than any defense I'd given her before. My mother insisted we talk outside. And before I could answer, she was already pushing through the doors into the sunlit parking lot, announcing, "If you want to play adult, then face me without an audience protecting you." As Paige hovered close behind, filming every step. I followed because staying inside would only give them another story to twist. And the moment I stepped onto the concrete, she added, "You humiliated us in there." Like the roles had somehow reversed without her noticing. I told her she'd been the one yelling across a store. But she lifted her chin and replied, "I was reminding you of who you are," refusing to let the wind or the staring customers interrupt her script. Paige angled her phone higher, whispering, "This is going viral," as if the parking lot were a stage she owned. I pulled the printed offer letter from my pocket, and my mother's eyes narrowed as she asked, "What is that supposed to prove?" while a couple filling their tanks slowed their movements to listen. I held the page steady and said, "It proves you were wrong about me." Watching her bracelet slide down her wrist as disbelief flickered across her face, Paige stepped closer and murmured, "That can't be real," her voice tightening as she tried to catch the text with her camera. I told her to stop recording, and she snapped back. People deserve to see the truth. Unaware of how much truth she had already leaked, my mother tried to pull the paper from my hand while saying, "Ashford wouldn't hire someone like you." But the tremor in her voice betrayed her certainty, cracking at the edges. I told her the offer wasn't up for debate. And she replied, "You're lying to hurt me." As if that had ever been my weapon, Paige finally looked down at her phone and whispered, "Mom, it's streaming," her thumb shaking as she fumbled with the screen. My mother hissed, "Turn it off." But Paige muttered, "It's been live for 20 minutes. And a gasp rippled through the small cluster of bystanders gathering near the pumps. Amelia stepped out of the store at that moment and called to my mother, "You need to pay for your items before you leave," her tone steady as she approached us across the lot. My mother waved her off with, "Charge my card." But Amelia replied, "It was declined," holding the receipt like evidence neither of them expected. Paige whispered, "Mom, you maxed it out on that jacket yesterday," her confidence collapsing as quickly as her grip on her phone. My mother demanded, "Just run it again." But Amelia said, "Cash only." And the breeze carried the words farther than any of us intended. I reached into my wallet and placed a single bill into my mother's hand, telling her, This is the last time I cover for you. While the hum of traffic softened around us, my mother stared at the money without speaking. And Paige looked at both of us as though she didn't know where to stand anymore. I stepped back toward the store and said, "We're done here." Not needing volume to make it final. The parking lot settled into quiet as I walked away, leaving their silence behind me on the hot pavement. My mother stood frozen with the bill still resting in her palm. And she finally managed. "You can't just walk away from your family." The words landing softer than any she'd used all morning. I told her, "I'm not walking away from family. I'm walking away from the version of me you keep trying to hold down." Feeling the truth settled deeper than the shake in her breath, Paige wiped at her cheek and whispered, "We didn't mean for it to get this far." Though the phone in her hand still glowed with the remnants of her live stream, I tucked my wallet back into my pocket and said, "Intent doesn't undo impact," knowing it was the cleanest boundary I had ever spoken aloud. My mother looked at the money again and murmured, "You've always misunderstood me." But there was no conviction behind it anymore. I answered, "Maybe. But today showed me enough." While the sound of a passing truck broke the silence between us, Paige stepped closer and asked, "So this is it?" Her voice, small in a way I hadn't heard since we were kids. I nodded and replied, "For now, yes." Because anything more would have been dishonest for both of us. I turned toward the store entrance, and my mother called after me, "When you fail, don't expect us to pick up the pieces." Almost out of habit rather than anger. I didn't look back when I told her, "I'm not planning to break this time." Letting the parking lot widen the space between us, Paige whispered, "Good luck tomorrow." And for once it didn't sound like a dare. I gave a quiet thank you, without slowing my steps as the automatic doors opened. Inside, Amelia handed me my time card and asked softly, "You ready to go?" And I told her. More than I thought I'd be. Realizing goodbye didn't have to look like victory to still feel like freedom. The hum of the store returned to something ordinary as I stepped out again, leaving behind the version of myself that had stayed silent far too long. My first morning at Ashford Financial Group felt quieter than I expected. And while I waited in the lobby, the team lead walked over and said, "We chose you because you don't fold under pressure." Letting the words settle in a place I hadn't allowed myself to imagine before. I followed him past glass offices and rows of monitors, feeling the pace of the building move around me with a rhythm completely unlike the store. When he asked if I was ready to start, I told him, yes, even though the truth was that I'd been waiting years to feel a door open like this. The sunlight on the polished floor made the whole space feel steadier than anything I'd stood on in a long time. During lunch, my phone buzzed with a message from Paige saying, "I'm sorry for yesterday." Her words short but more careful than any she'd sent in months. I read it once and slipped the phone back into my bag, knowing I wasn't ready to rewrite the distance overnight. My mother didn't text at all, and the silence felt less like a wound and more like a space I needed to let exist. The building hummed with conversations and keyboard clicks that didn't require anything from me except to show up. When the elevator doors opened at the end of the day, I caught my reflection in the brushed metal and felt something shift. Small but real. Someone from the team asked, "Heading out," and I answered, "Yeah. See you tomorrow." Surprised by how natural the words sounded. Stepping outside into the Denver air, I let myself breathe in the quiet. Not as an escape, but as a beginning. The walk to the parking lot felt lighter than anything I had carried away from before. When I reached my car, I whispered, "Thank you for staying with me," letting the quiet settle in a way that felt earned. If this story gave you even a little strength, I'd love for you to subscribe and share your thoughts. Your voice matters here. And I hope you'll come back for the next one.